You're listening to Brandon Sports Talk, interviewing professional athletes and Paralympians and Olympians. And now for your professional athlete interview and your host, Brandon P.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege of interviewing the USA high jump track and field Olympian, Erin Shean. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Brandon.
Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in competing in track and field?
So I started when I was very, very, very young to really just have this obsession, I guess, of sports. I just loved any and all sports. And it took me a while, actually. Track and field and volleyball, which is my other sport, were the final two sports that I picked up, and they ended up taking me all the way. But I started my young career in athletics in things like gymnastics and ballet, which obviously were not a great fit for my height, but they gave me the ability to just really get good body awareness at a young age. Really, I just was obsessed with sports from such a young age.
While in college, what was that like going to Texas Longhorns and competing in volleyball and track and field?
Ah, it was such a great experience. I actually started at the University of Arizona, and then I transferred to the University of Texas. My coach had gotten the assistant coaching job at UT. And, I am from Texas. So to be able to go back to my home state was amazing. And UT obviously is a huge school. So it was such an honor and a privilege to be able to compete for such a large, well respected, um, both academically and athletically school. I had a great time, I had a great experience while I was at the University of Texas.
How was that experience like getting to compete in your home crowd area from being from Texas?
So great. It was great to be back in my home state and jump and play volleyball in front of a lot of the local fans that I had competed in front of growing up. So I was just really excited to go back and wear that burnt orange jersey.
Of course, how was that experience balancing being a volleyball player and being a track athlete?
I always tell people that I am a huge believer in dual sport or multi-sport athletes. I just believe that being able to cross train through seasons is, really a good way to go about an athletic career, both physically and mentally. So I was just really fortunate to be able to play two sports at that high of a level, both collegiately and post collegiately. Um, I think that when you play two different sports like I did in opposite seasons, just being able to play a sport that's complementary, I guess, and synergistic to the other sport was a really great way to stay, not burned out, to not reach that level of just being so tired that I didn't want to do the sport anymore. I was constantly flipping back and forth from one sport to another. And so I really kept my interest and it was always exciting. And I just loved being a dual sport athlete, particularly at the college and the professional level.
Of course, what was that transition like from going from post collegiately to making it to the professional team?
Yeah, it was a whole nother level, right? I am currently about to start a coaching program with athletes that are in the high performance development program with USA Volleyball. And it's my goal to be able to teach them how to successfully make transitions. So these athletes are going to be making the transition from high school to college, which is a huge transition. And then I'm also, working with athletes to make that transition from college to the professional world. And then once they retire, being able to make that transition from being an athlete to actually going into the real world, which is another huge, huge leap. So those transitions in our lives are really, really important. And it's my goal to be able to help develop the athletes so that when they make those transitions, they don't lose themselves. So their identity is not connected to their sport. And, you know, it's just so important that they realize that their identity is who they are and what kind of person they want to be rather than what sport they play.
Of course, growing up, what was that experience like getting to watch the Olympics as a kid on TV and then years later get to compete in your Olympics?
Yeah, so my story is that when I was 6 years old, I told my parents that I was going to be an Olympian one day. It was watching the 1984 Olympics on television, which you can back into my age from that comment. But yeah, I watched the Olympics on television in 1984 with my parents, and I turned to them and I said, I'm going to be an Olympian one day. And I don't think that they really believed me. You know, granted, my father and my mother, neither one of them were highly successful athletes by any means. I don't even know that my mother played high school sports and my dad was he sat the bench behind the bench of the JV basketball team. So we didn't have any real athletic ability in our immediate family. So when I said I wanted to be an Olympian at 6, my parents were kind of like, okay, well, good luck. And I was just determined. I was very, very focused on the goal. And from the age of 6 on, I made it a goal to make an Olympic team. I didn't know what sport it was going to be at the time, obviously at 6, but I eventually found track and field and volleyball, and that's what I decided to do. I decided once I found both of those sports that I not only wanted to make it in one sport, but I wanted to make it in two sports. So barely missed it on the second sport in volleyball, but did play with the U.S. national team on the volleyball court, and then ended up going to Sydney in 2000 in the high jump.
Of course, what was that experience like making that US national team to play volleyball?
Wow. So I joined the U.S. national team a lot later than my teammates did. I was so focused on the track and making my first Olympic team as a high jumper that I spent all of my junior years really focused on competing on the track, high jumping. I went to my first Olympic trials in 1996 as a high jumper. And so I didn't play with the U.S. national team, like the under 19 high performance group in USA Volleyball when I was a junior. So I joined the national team, just went straight to the U.S. national team when I finished college. So it's very, very late. Most athletes will spend their junior years developing through the national team system and then go into the senior national team after college. But I was a little bit of in a unique situation because of the multi-sport part.
Of course, in 96, what was that experience like making your first Olympic team to go to Sydney?
Well, I was definitely the youngest athlete in the field. I was the only high schooler. I think one of the only younger athletes, overall. I don't know if there were how many, if at all, there were collegiate athletes even in there. But I was, I think, 18, very young. I ended up finishing fifth. I think it we I can't remember if it was a complete tie for fifth or if I just tied on height, but I may have been lower off of misses. I need to go back and look at the actual results, but regardless, I think I jumped 6'2" and a quarter as a high school athlete, which was I was proud of that. I really was proud of that. I mean, I was disappointed not to make the team, but I was proud with my first showing at like a huge event being that young. It was just such a surreal experience. And, obviously in Atlanta in 96, that track was the track that they used for the Olympic Games. And so it was just really a special experience to be able to compete in the Olympic trials on the same track as the Olympic Games. And I actually still in my house have a little piece of that Olympic track that I got to keep and frame. So um, really just a memory that I'll never forget.
Of course, in 97, what was that experience like competing for your world championship in Athens?
Yeah, so I like I said, I narrowly missed making the Olympic team in 1996 as a high schooler, and so I just knew that 97 I was really going to make a run at making the world championship team since that was the world championship year. And so in 96, I ended up placing top three at USA's. I think I jumped 6'4" to make that team. And I also had the World Championship Olympic standard. And so, it was my first real huge international meet in Athens. I had competed in the 1996 World Junior Championships, but that was juniors and that was in Australia. This was my first senior national team. So again, super special experience. I went there thinking, I'll probably have a few more of these in the future. So like, let's just figure out the lay of the land and what it feels like to compete on a senior world championship level, and then go back and crush it in the following years.
Of course, in 2000, what was that experience like getting to make that Olympics and getting to compete in the Olympics?
I mean, if you can only imagine declaring to your parents when you were 6 that you're going to make an Olympic team, and then fast forwarding, I think I was 21 or 22 when I made my first Olympic team or when I made the Olympic team. Um, so that's a lot of years to train towards one goal. You have to have a lot of discipline and a lot of focus to go that many years to compete at that level and then eventually make the Olympic team and not veer, veer from the course and just stay on course. So, um, being able to clear that bar to make my first Olympic team in 2000, I remember it was like it was yesterday in Sacramento, California. Um, we were tied for first, and I think we had moved the bar up to 6'4 1/4, and my competitor, I think she cleared it on the first attempt. I may have missed and then cleared it on my second attempt, and so that was the only difference between the first and second place spot, but three go to the Olympics. And so the moment that I cleared that bar, I knew that that was the bar that I needed to clear to make the Olympic team. And it was just so surreal. Being over, planning for takeoff and being over that bar was just that moment where I thought, all those years of putting in all the work and the training and the sacrifice and everything is all culminating in this one jump. And it was extremely powerful. And then I went on to the Olympic Games. Again, I thought this will be my first Olympic Games of many. Um, I was a bit burnt out by that time because Sydney was a later Olympics. Sydney, I actually took the semester off of school at the University of Texas. It was my senior year. And so I took the semester off to compete in the Olympics because the Sydney Olympics came later than a normal Olympics because of the opposite seasons. And I just was burnt out by then. I had been playing volleyball track for solid, more than 4 years through college and in high school as well. And I think just mentally and physically, I was worn out. And so I didn't have a good showing in Sydney, which I'm really disappointed about. But I really truly thought it would be my first of, 3 or 4 Olympic teams. And it ended up being my only one due to a few different setbacks that I had prior to other Olympic Games during the Olympic years. And so, the moral of that story is to seize the moment and no matter what, to push forward through adversity and try to stay on course because you never know if you're going to get another chance. So, still an amazing experience. I'm proud to say that I was able to be at the Olympic Games and walk through the opening ceremonies and be with all those other incredible athletes. So never a regret, but seize the moment.
Of course, what was that experience like making the Sydney team to go to the Olympics and getting to go to the Olympics as you grew up as a kid looking up to those Olympians?
Gosh, amazing. I mean, you're sitting next to all of USA gymnastics and USA basketball and all these athletes that you watch on TV and that are the best of the best in their sport. And to be able to be considered in that category was incredible. And so I'm just really grateful for the opportunity and for the God-given ability that I had and have. And yeah, I'm really, really thankful for the ability that I was given to be able to make it to that level.
Of course, leading up to the Sydney Olympics, what was that training like preparing to make your Olympic team?
Oh man, I think every athlete that is trying to make an Olympic team um, goes through adverse situations that aren't ideal. It's very rare that it will ever go so smoothly. I feel like I was pretty lucky that my training went relatively smoothly, but there were certainly setbacks that I experienced along the way. And it just really taught me to push through those setbacks because time doesn't stop. So if you can't persevere and get through those setbacks, you're just going to get left behind. So really working with the mind to change that narrative that, you're telling yourself when you feel that negative chatter in your head and getting yourself back on track to persevere forward towards your goals. So it was it was a good learning experience for sure when I came across those setbacks.
How did it feel to get to put on that Team USA kit and have the Olympic rings on your uniform?
I don't even know that I can describe how that feels the first time or how it feels really to just even wear USA across your chest the first time. It's just an amazing feeling to know that you're representing your country. You're one of the top athletes in the country, also in the world, because many times a lot of the US athletes are also the top athletes in the world. So to be put in that category is something that is a little bit mind-blowing. But particularly the Olympic rings. I mean, I had been living with the Olympic rings in my head again since I was 6. So to feel and see all of that come to fruition was an experience that I can't even begin to put into words. It was just so special.
Of course, for my listeners that don't know, how do you get to compete in high jump and what is high jumping?
Yeah, so I first competed in the high jump when I was in 7th grade. When you go into 7th grade was junior high for me. So um, went to a private school through 6th grade, and we didn't have high jump or any really organized sports. So when I got into junior high in the 7th grade, we went through the cycle of sports. So volleyball, and then basketball, and then track and field. Those were kind of the 3 in the order that they went in. And so I played volleyball. Of course, I was a very tall kid. So all of those sports worked really well for me. And then when I got to the track in the spring, because of my height, the coach of the track team automatically said, "You're tall. You need to go to the high jump." And so, which is, very stereotypical. A lot of high jumpers are tall and thin, but it's not, there are exceptions to that rule. And so they sent me over to the high jump pit, and it was almost as if I was born to high jump. So the high jump is different from the pole vault, if you're kind of wondering which one it is. The pole vault uses a pole, and you're launching yourself in the air from, just this tiny, long, skinny pole. Whereas the high jump is just you're using your own body. It's just your own 2 feet that you are taking off and then trying to clear this long, skinny bar over backwards. So I felt like I was born to high jump. It was just kind of that, the way that the approach was going off of 1 foot. I like to tell the story that when I was little, we had a long 1-story home, and I would start from one end, and I would, or if I wanted to get from the game room on one side of the house to my bedroom on the other side of the house, I would start from one end and I would touch all the door jambs on 1 foot, like kind of that same 1 foot takeoff motion. And I would hurdle all the ottomans, all the barriers in my way. I would hurdle all the ottomans and touch the door jambs. And it was always off of 1 foot. So by the time I got into junior high in the 7th grade and they said, go over to the high jump pit, that motion and that technique just came super naturally to me. I had been practicing it unbeknownst to me for years and years and years prior to actually doing it in a sport. So I just had a really good 1 foot takeoff conversion. So the penultimate to the takeoff was just really fast, and I was able to convert that speed to height in the high jump.
Of course, as a kid, how did that help you in practicing at such a young age to then when you did make the national team to high jump, it came so natural to you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was a middle blocker um, in volleyball. And if you know anything about volleyball or the high jump, being a middle on the volleyball court is actually it translates a lot into the high jump because middles run a lot of slides behind the setter, which is the play that we call when a setter sets the ball behind them and the middle goes behind the setter off of 1 foot. And it's very, very similar takeoff to the high jump. So there are some people that are like, well, they're such different sports. Like, how were you able to play both at such a high level? And I kind of look at it as, they were extremely similar in so many ways. And in fact, many times I would jump my highest high jump marks right off of my volleyball season because I got so many repetitions of running the slide. So many repetitions of running the slide off of 1 foot that I wasn't even thinking about mentally. And it converted to helping me with that takeoff on the track in the high jump after my volleyball season. So I jumped a lot of my highest marks right off of my volleyball season. And I just felt like the training between those two sports helped each other so much. Like I jumped really well off of my volleyball season when I was a high jumper, and then I got a lot of really great plyo and weight training in my track season that also helped me in my volleyball season. So, as different as they seem, I felt like they were really good sports to be a multi-sport athlete with.
Of course, how does it feel to have OLY behind your last name and be known as an Olympian?
So great. I've had to learn to separate that from my identity a bit because, you had asked me earlier if, making that transition from, sports to, high school to college and then college to professional, what that feels like. And that transition beyond that of making it from professional sports to the real world is a huge transition for athletes. And so if you can't learn to separate, Erin, the Olympic athlete, high jumper, from Erin in the real world, then it can be a real issue. So that's what was kind of the catalyst behind me starting my own coaching company, um, helping people really figure out what it is that they're passionate about and how to separate their identity from what it is that they do. Because what you do in a career should really, most of the time, not be what your identity is. So, I will say though that the OLY behind my name, and thankfully the International Olympic Committee did create those three letters for us, which only happened probably a few years ago. Before that, we didn't have that. But now that we have the OLY behind our name, it does give me a sense of pride to know that all of that hard work um, culminated in those three letters, and that it can't ever be taken away. Once an Olympian, always Olympian.
Of course, what was that feeling like getting to live out that Olympic dream that you grew up growing a part of being so young?
I mean, it's just, you know, sorry, can you hear my dog barking? You can't. Okay, perfect. Um, so it was such a you know, great experience thinking that, one day I could be marching in those opening ceremonies when I was a little kid. It gave me something to look up to. So it was, I think it's always good for kids and even for adults to have goals that they can look up to and look forward to, and um, keep track of their progress. And I just feel really fortunate that I was able to see what it was that I wanted to do at such a young age. I don't think that's the norm. And sometimes I think, that it was more difficult for me to find out what I wanted to do as an older person after my career, because it came so easily to me as a younger child. So it's a blessing and a curse to be able to find out what you're going to do when you're 6, and then later on in life be done with that chapter of your life and say, okay, well, now what am I going to do? Well, it was easy for me to figure out what I wanted to do when I was younger, so now what am I going to do when I'm older? And that second stage of my life was a lot more difficult for me to figure out. So I do look at it that I was very fortunate to be able to find my place when I was younger. But at the same time, it gave me a little bit of a false sense of security that I would find out what I wanted to do when I was older as well.
Of course, for you, what was that Mama I Made It moment like for you in your career?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What was that Mama I Made It moment like for you going to the Olympics and experiencing the Olympics?
Um, it was absolutely incredible. The moment that I think that I realized my dream, it was just amazing. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything more with that experience. Maybe I could have asked for a couple more Olympic games, but that wasn't in the plans. And so it was just a really special experience, I think.
Who are some of the athletes that you looked up to throughout your career?
Yeah. On the track, I felt like I always kind of admired Jackie Joyner Kersee. She was the female athlete that was really just in the spotlight at that, at the time when I was younger. So I really looked up to her, and I looked up to some of the professional beach volleyball players on the volleyball court. And then always just had like this sense of awe when I would watch the U.S. women's national team volleyball players. I remember when I was in college and the U.S. national team came to play an exhibition match at the University of Arizona when I was there as a freshman and sophomore, because I played 2 volleyball seasons at the University of Arizona, and they came and played an exhibition match. And one of them, the setter of the national team at that time, left her knee pads in the locker room. And I was like, oh my gosh, like she wore these knee pads. I'm never giving these away. And they were super sweaty and gross, but like I just thought it was the coolest thing that I got to like keep knee pads, sweaty knee pads of one of the national team players. So, um, it's always, I think we should always have role models. I was a little bit unique in that I was so focused on making the Olympic team myself that I don't have a ton of memories of athletes that I just was like so overly enamored with that I just was obsessed with them. But I think I was more obsessed with the idea of making it to that level, regardless of what the name of the athlete was.
What was that transition like for you from going from being an Olympian and competing at such a high stage to then life after sports?
Ooh, I think that was the most difficult transition of my life. Again, having to realize that I had put so much of my identity into being an athlete and how to separate those two. Um, it makes me realize how difficult it is, for NFL players or NBA or anyone who's made it to such a high level to have their career be now over and now mix and gel and all the things with, you know, just being a normal person, and how it's so important that we don't tie ourselves to our sports because it's a false sense of identity. And so um, for me, that transition was difficult. There are still challenges that I experience with it. I have a lot of dreams of being back on the court and being back on the track. So it's tough, but I've done a lot of work to um, to make that transition. And so it's 10 years later, 15 years later after my career, and I'm starting to feel a little bit more comfortable in my post athletic skin. So,
How has things changed in high jump from when you were a high jumper to now?
ooh, I think that athletes are only getting better, and it's only a matter of time before the world record is broken. I think that the statistic is that the women's high jump is the longest standing world record on the track. Um, so it's just like the day that record gets broken will be an incredible day, and I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen relatively soon. I just feel like with all the technology these days and the different training methods and all that, that just athletes are just getting better in general. And I really notice it on the volleyball court. I really notice it on the volleyball court. I feel as though if my old self were to try out for the US national team today, there's no way I would have made it. I feel like I would have been too short and not strong enough. I think athletes these days, they start lifting and plyoing and doing all the things necessary to be successful. They start doing those things a lot earlier. And athletes are just taller now. Um, all the players on the US national team on the volleyball court are just tall and powerful. And they are just getting taller and more powerful. And so it's pretty incredible to watch. It's fun to watch and also scary.
Of course, do you hold any records on the track and field side?
I think I still might hold be I think I have a tie for the NCAA record indoors at 6'5" and a half. I don't think anyone has jumped higher than that since I competed. Um, and I mean, of course, I think I mean, I know I still hold that record as well at the University of Texas. Um, of course, my high school records, like some of these things it'll probably take them a while to get broken. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think. I think that might be it. Yeah, I mean, I was never the record holder, the U.S. record holder. That would be Louise Ritter. She was a gold medalist in the high jump, so I think she jumped 6'8". Um, and the record for the number of national championships won or national teams made is probably Amy Akoff. Um, so yeah, it's a very humbling that question is very humbling because even though I made an Olympic team, if I compare myself against all the greats, I feel like I was average. So, I mean, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I mean, making an Olympic team is not average. I know that, but like, when I think about it, all the great athletes, like just so many good ones.
Of course, what are some of your future plans in your career moving forward?
So I recently left my former career of in commercial real estate brokerage. My whole family is in commercial real estate. My brother's in the development side. My father was in brokerage for over 40 years. And I was in commercial real estate brokerage as well. But I woke up one day and I thought, I just don't think that this is my path for the rest of my life. And what can I do to utilize and leverage my experience and my skill sets to better the lives of others? Because ultimately, that's what we're here on earth for. And I didn't feel like I was getting that from commercial real estate. And so I left the commercial real estate world and I launched my own high performance and mindset and career coaching company called Ascension Coaching and Consulting. And I now coach individuals to optimize their potential, to awaken their Olympian within. Because I believe that we all have an Olympian inside of us, within us. We just have to find that. We have to find what it is that we can reach that level at. And so that's what I do now. And I absolutely love it. I've never looked back for even a second. And I really feel like this is probably my long-term career, and it feels good to have finally found it because I found my first career as an athlete so early at 6. And it took me until 45 to find my second half of my life career. But I finally found it and I love it.
That's so amazing. What advice would you give those people in college that are looking to compete in track and field?
I would advise them to search within themselves, to realize what they are passionate about, who they are outside of their sport, because that will be more beneficial to them in the long run than the athlete is in the shorter run. And I would just recommend and advise them to whatever it is that they want to accomplish, go for it with reckless abandon. Go for it hard. And if you don't feel motivated to go for it hard, then you're probably in the wrong place. Because if you're truly passionate about it, the hard work will come. And to just work really, really hard for the things that you want, but to always know who you are. outside of your sport.
What advice would you give those future Olympians that are looking to represent a national team like US or Canada?
I would advise them to just stay focused on the goal, that there will be times when you will experience setbacks. Every athlete does. And if making an Olympic team is really what you want, stay after it. And I would say that before you experience those setbacks, anticipate them and read The Inner Game of Tennis, because it will help you for the time that you actually do experience those setbacks. To understand the difference between self one and self two, and how self one can sabotage self two if you let it.
What advice would you give those first time Olympians experiencing the Olympics for the first time like you did?
Carpe diem, seize the day, and never expect that it's going to happen again, because this could be your only opportunity. Make the best of it.
What advice would you give those Olympians transitioning from the sport they love to life after the sport?
Start that transition early. Start the transition before you're ready to transition, so that when that transition time comes, it doesn't come as a shock. And so I say start that transition, start figuring out what it is that makes you tick, what it is that you love, what are you passionate about, what you want to pursue as early as possible. That can be in high school, even if you feel like you're going to have a long career afterwards. Always have balance in your life in order to be able to give time and attention to the things that you are going to be doing after sport, because your career as an athlete is finite, but your life as a person lasts a lot longer.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
So I'm on Facebook. I am at Ascension Coaching. Hey, it's either Ascension Coaching 1 or Ascension Coaching. And then Instagram is the same, at Ascension Coaching. My website is www.ascensioncoaching.co. And LinkedIn, Ascension Coaching and Consulting. And I'll probably give those to you in case you want to put them in the notes.
Thank you again, Erin Aldrich, for your interview, and best of luck in your future as you begin this new career.
Thanks so much, Brandon. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Erin, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.